I'm pleased to welcome you here today as we launch a new SARC report from Anglicare Tasmania's Social Action and Research Centre. I start by acknowledging and paying respects to the Tasmanian Aboriginal community as the traditional and original owners and continuing custodians of this land. I'd also like to acknowledge the presence of Elise Archer, the Speaker of the House of Assembly, Cassio Connor, the Leader of the Greens, Josh Willie and Rob Valentine from the Legislative Council, Penny National on behalf of Minister Petrusma, and Mark Morrissey, the Commissioner for Children. As many of you know, the Social Action and Research Centre of Anglicare seeks to focus upon social issues that impact upon the Tasmanian community. What we look to do is to invest into research projects to develop a credible, local evidence base for good public policy. One of the strengths of our research is its connection to the direct services and support that Anglicare delivers to Tasmanians in need. Our research is grounded in the real experiences of the Tasmanians that we work with and draws on the knowledge and expertise of our frontline staff, and this report is no exception. In fact, when Catherine Robinson started working with SARC last year, it was through her early conversations with Anglicare frontline staff that identified the focus of this report, highly vulnerable teens, as an area of research priority. The report is called Too Hard, and it's got a question mark at the end. It's not a statement, but a question. It's meant to be a challenge to each of us that read it. It's meant to be a challenge for us to consider why it is that as a community we allow children to fall through the protections and systems that are in place. It also questions our commitment, our will to meet these complex needs. And perhaps uncomfortably, it asks that we examine our own values and attitudes to this group of children. This group who, when visible to the general community, are more likely to be maligned for their behaviour than supported in their distress. The voices of the children sear us from the pages of this report. In entering the stories of their lives, we cannot turn away and dismiss their pain. It's too present, too raw. We also hear from the wide range of service providers that work with these highly vulnerable young Tasmanians. In their voices, we again encounter the complexity of their young lives. We hear the care, compassion, frustration, despondence, cynicism and love. We hear a determination to do the best that they can for these children within and often beyond the limitations of their roles. These are people who deserve our respect and our thanks for the work that they do. They also offer their expert insight and point to a way forward. This report stands as a testament to the lives of young Tasmanians that need us to do better. In launching it today, the report author, Dr. Catherine Robinson, will share her reflections on the key findings that the report presents. But first, I'd like to welcome Chloe and Oliver to the stage. Chloe and Oliver will be narrating some of the short excerpts of the life story interviews that Catherine conducted with the Tasmanian young people featured in the report. Can you welcome Chloe and Oliver?
She was bashed every day by Dad. He was just very violent, didn't care. In my eyes, he's never happy unless he's hurting someone. Mum charged him and he went to jail for ramming the truck. He chased my mum in a car up the driveway and hit the front of the stairs at the front of the house. If she would have fell up the stairs, he would have hit her. And if Mum and Dad were still together to this day, my mum would be dead. And I know that because he hasn't changed. And I think my mum knows that too.
Well, my mum, because she had a really rough childhood, she was tampered with and made to do things that she didn't want to do. So she was pretty messed up mentally as well. And so she took up drinking, a big drinking habit. And she was in domestic violence with one of her ex-partners, my older brother's dad. And yeah, we've seen a lot of her getting hit into. I used to lock myself in the bathroom with the other kids just so they didn't see what he put her through. I hated seeing what he put my mum through. Used to get up before the kids and help my mum. I got up and would help her clean up the blood because there used to be a lot. So I used to just help her clean up because she couldn't see properly. Used to be pretty scared, just used to be a lot of blood. I didn't mind helping out. She needed someone to help her. She didn't have anyone, so I feel like I had to be there for her because she had no one else to support her.
I guess it was nerve-wracking knowing that every time I went there, it was just violence towards me. Yeah, didn't really want to go out there. I had a phone and Mum said to just video everything pretty much and use it as proof because he used to always deny it. She said he didn't hit me and that I'm pretty much just said I'm sick of being physically hurt.
I always got molested as a child. For about 10 years, I was being molested by Mum's husband. And I never said anything because he said if I said anything, he would do worse things to me. So I didn't say anything until my mum ran away from him because he bashed her. We were on the run. We went all over Tasmania because we were running away from my mum's ex-husband.
I've always felt abandoned and not loved. I feel like a lot of it's myself. Sometimes I blame myself for why my stepdad doesn't love me and why I was abandoned and neglected and whatever. But I don't know. In a way, I feel like Mum's neglected me. I feel like she chooses everyone else above me. If you really love your kids, you don't do this to them. You don't make them feel unloved or not wanted. And what I see with my biological dad is he's never wanted me, but Mum did, and that's why they kept me. Or is it because of the money or what's the go? I don't believe Dad loved me. I think that I don't know. I think that he might have just thought a child is like a doll, something you can just chuck away.
I tried to commit suicide 5 times in my life. The last time was because of Dad, which they knew because while I was at the hospital and out of it, I just kept crying for Dad. And I told them, I kept saying, why doesn't my dad love me? What have I done wrong? But Dad went to jail again for bashing a police officer, drunk. And that wrecked me. I actually sent him a letter, a really abusive letter, like, how can you promise your kids you're not going back to jail but do it? If you really loved your kids, you wouldn't leave them constantly all the time, and you wouldn't hit their mum.
Yeah, I was just couch surfing everywhere. I was all over the place. Wherever I could crash, I'd crash. If it was the good people or the wrong people, it didn't bother me. So there was no fixed address at all. It was all remnants of what happened. Remnants as in pieces of how. Just everything that growing up happens. Yeah, when you're on your own sort of thing, you've just got to do what you've got to do.
When I found out my dad passed away, I dropped out. I don't know why, but I just stopped trying. And now I feel not stupid, but I struggle to read now and I struggle to do work, and I'm that behind. I've probably gone 1 whole term in 3 years, 3 or 4 years. I just gave up on everything. Then I started drinking. Then I started smoking cigarettes and marijuana. Started being a little criminal and just not caring, not giving a damn about anything or anyone. I know how to hotwire a car. Don't really know how to drive one. Dropped out of school because I was being bullied as well. Kids always used to laugh at me. When I tried to go back at school, they laughed at me because my dad had passed away, which is ridiculous. It just made me mad. I used to always get into mischief at school and not listen. Then I dropped out. Then my depression got really bad that I just locked myself in my room for a whole year. A whole year I locked myself in my room for. This was when I was 12. And I didn't eat. I just wanted to wither away to nothing.
What I do want is for kids to stay at home for as long as they can, because it's hard not to be at home. And I hope that school are going to give kids help when they need it, so they don't turn out like me.
These are the voices I'm mulling over as I come down the Midlands. I'm in that strange no man's land between the field, where I've been interviewing young people and service providers, and home. Catapulting along in the dark, I can feel the annoying surge of the pool car. Bloody Anglicare. I bet they get these dud cars on some kind of special deal.
Yeah.
I stop at Campbelltown and somehow I get the only hot pie ever sold at Banjo's and manage to burn my lip. I jump, dropping crumbs in my lap. When I go to brush the crumbs off, I notice my hands are shaky. Bloody Banjo's. Why can't anyone do anything with consistency anymore? They can't even consistently sell lukewarm pies. I set off again, and I can't work out the high beams. I can't be bothered listening to the radio. I wonder if my daughter has done her reader for tomorrow, and I bet not. And I bet there's no bread for lunches either. Damn it, I should have got some rolls for lunch boxes at Banjo's. Why didn't I think of that? I don't ring to say goodnight to the kids. I just don't. I'm not ready. My head is full of the voices from the last few days, replaying, percolating. It's clear to me that I'd be better off without this project. Tears spring into my eyes. I wish I'd never started it. It's just too hard. Over many years of doing research and advocacy on social justice issues, I've come to recognise that when things get too hard, you're probably finally encountering reality. And after allowing for a necessary low of feeling overwhelmed and lonely, it's from this point that your effort really matters. And I think this applies whether you're a social researcher, a politician, a child protection worker, a senior bureaucrat or a youth worker. Too Hard, Highly Vulnerable Teens in Tasmania is a project which seeks to describe and make sense of the realities of a group of young Tasmanians often seen as too hard to help. In contact with child protection and youth justice services, police and homelessness services, this is a group of young people aged 10 to 17 whose complex needs overwhelm the capacity of any one service. For individuals, individual services and the broader service system, it can be the case that non-engagement or inadequate engagement with this cohort results from a fundamental lack of resources and from the exhaustion and drive for self-preservation that comes with this. At the very point at which extra skill, understanding, capacity and time is needed for our young people in our community, these are simply not available. And so certain truths about this group of teens emerge. They just don't engage. They can self-protect in contexts of harm and neglect. They self-select where to live, so there's no point placing them. They don't go to appointments. They won't take medication. They're just too hard. Such truths dominate, especially in contexts where resources remain scarce or even contract. These truths help to justify and naturalise inadequate intervention. Funded by Anglicare Tasmania, the project I set out to undertake was an investigation of why it is that teens in Tasmania become highly vulnerable and what is needed to make their lives better. A key outcome of the project is the documentation of alternative truths, which counter some of the preconceived ideas about teens with complex needs, including those about their capacity for self-protection. Without eroding the strength and resilience of young people, the project makes a case for understanding some young people in Tasmania as in fact being highly vulnerable and in urgent need of support services with capacity for intensive therapeutic engagement. In short, the project documents the experiences of Tasmanian kids whose basic needs are not being met. These are kids who often suffer harm at the hands of individual adults and who then experience systemic neglect. I call this double suffering. Drawing on life story work with teens and in-depth interviews with a range of service providers who work directly with them, the project illustrates trajectories of high vulnerability which begin in early childhood and only deepen in adolescence. In my life story work with highly vulnerable teens, again, those who have contact with child protection, youth justice, police and homelessness services, two key childhood experiences emerged as central. Violence and abandonment were core shared experiences across the lives of young people I interviewed. Family violence, sexual and physical abuse, and sexual and physical violence were repeated experiences through childhood and adolescence. Alongside the impacts of complex trauma resulting from violence and abuse, young people described a profound and deeply disturbing sense of abandonment by parents and caregivers and other adults who actively hurt them or who were unable to keep them safe, often because of their own complex needs. Some had parents who died, who went to jail, who simply left without explanation, or who were perhaps absent from the beginning. Siblings too came and went as parents separated from partners and made new relationships. Young people had chaotic family and physical living environments in which care could not be relied on and attachments remained thin. Even for those young people who did not experience violence or abuse during childhood, the profound experience of an absence of care and protection and the grief and disorientation associated with this nonetheless featured. Compounding the research participants' experiences of violence, neglect or sense of abandonment were also their experiences of being responsible for in fact providing care for others, for siblings, parents and grandparents. For example, young people described providing extraordinary physical and emotional care and protection for siblings and mothers during and after episodes of domestic violence. They provided support and care for parents with physical and mental illness and for ailing grandparents. One young woman described what seemed to be a lifetime of intense caring responsibilities for multiple younger siblings, including her prematurely born baby sister and for her mother with cancer. She also provided personal care for her grandmother, and she missed primary school whilst doing this. While again, I'm only able to give you quick glimpses into this lived context, the intensity of early childhood suffering, stress and adult responsibility in the lives of highly vulnerable teens cannot be underestimated. Eventually, between 10 and 13 years old, young people commonly describe reaching breaking points at which their physical and mental health often began deteriorating dramatically, and they began couch surfing to escape their current home circumstances. As one young person described it, "I just couldn't take it anymore." As you might guess, however, young people's experiences of couch surfing were also marked by sexual and physical violence, family violence, standover and exposure to drug use. Young people slept rough and also accessed specialist homeless services. But predominantly, for those participating in my research, it was a roundabout of insecure staying with friends and even periods of returning to unsafe homes through which they cobbled together ongoing shelter. Young people also experienced extreme poverty. Often they were too young to receive youth allowance, and even for those over 16 who'd been lucky enough to access the needed specialist assistance to make their application, poverty remained an issue. Survival crimes such as stealing food and clothing and trespassing became necessary. At the same time as young people were exiting home, experiencing homelessness and becoming involved with older youth and more serious crime, they were also losing contact with their own peers and exiting school environments. It became clear through my interviews that for young people, both home and mainstream school, as the key environments normally expected to enable young people to flourish, were not only unsafe, but resoundingly reinforced negative self-concepts and a sense of hopelessness. Together, it was bullying and suspensions which turned school into an alienating environment that young people were in turn becoming old enough to reject and escape. As well as being bullied, interactions within the school environment seemed to trigger young people's extreme and uncontrolled anger. Anger that in turn stemmed from their own experiences of complex trauma and the absence of care and protection. Beginning in primary school, these violent outbursts involved both students and staff and ultimately resulted in young people being suspended, expelled or dropping out, often from grade 6 onwards. Young people reported little interest from schools in the complex issues which may underpin such violent behaviour, and some got a clear sense that they would not be missed if they just stopped turning up. Significantly, young people's descriptions of childhood and adolescence were resoundingly validated through interviews with a wide range of service providers, working both within government and non-government sectors. These service providers also described an inadequate service response to the profound complex trauma and neglect they saw this cohort of young people experiencing. They characterised the service landscape in Tasmania as unable to provide the full and proper age-appropriate care needed by highly vulnerable teens. What I saw through their eyes was a dire mismatch between the long-term therapeutic relational care they see highly vulnerable teens as needing and the current reality of revolving referrals between short-term and uncoordinated interventions. So here's the problem. As a child or young person aged 10 to 17, if you're not able to receive care through your family, for whatever reason, what do you do? Where do you go? Who do you go to? It might be expected by the Tasmanian community that child safety services would be the service to provide the holistic response needed by highly vulnerable teens. Consistently, however, it emerged in my discussions, including with child safety staff, that without placement options in out-of-home care that could provide a meaningful alternative to young people's current home environments, there was little incentive to seek child protection orders for young people. And in terms of those young people not meeting the current threshold for child protection orders, how to ensure these young people receive daily care wasn't clear. Among young people's options are homelessness services, which provide support and accommodation, but only from 13 years old. Homeless service staff describe their struggles to provide the kind of support needed by vulnerable teens. With just one worker staffing services night and day, providing the intense therapeutic care young people need is an overwhelming struggle. Of course, all services do their best, but ultimately the challenging issues young people face make them more likely to be exited. That's if they can access a bed in the first place. Homeless service staff describe the constant stress of finding themselves as one of the last services providing general care to this cohort. Confronting complex trauma and other mental illness, self-harm and suicidal behaviour, drug use and addiction, they were at their wits' end in terms of trying to access other specialist supports for their clients. Unable to access mental health services through the Child and Adolescent Mental Health Service, and without residential drug and alcohol detox and rehab available for under 18s in Tasmania, many service providers felt they just helped young people lurch between crisis after crisis and little more. The absence of drug detox and rehab and the absence of accessible, ongoing community mental health support for trauma and self-harm were experienced as major gaps. And without these key pieces of the support puzzle in place, staff not only felt unsupported in their own professional practice, but were also distressed witnesses to young people's long-term cycles of homelessness and suffering. And so we arrive back at my Midlands Highway moment. We feel angry, overwhelmed, and it just seems too hard. They seem too hard to help. They need too much from too many services. So how do we, as individuals, as organisations, as a community, rise from this moment? For me, it's about thinking about those young people's voices. I think about their fall through the various safety nets we wrongly assume have capacity to catch them. Our safety nets are too thin, and if we don't want to see highly vulnerable teens hit the ground, then we need to listen again to what it is they need to be held safe. What I heard through my research and what this report clearly documents is young people's overwhelming need for care. When care and protection, for whatever complex reasons, are not available within families, they need to be provided and fully resourced in a way that works for vulnerable teens, not for political cycles, contracting processes, or organisational politics. To be clear, what I'm talking about here is fulfilling our obligations to provide not just daily care and shelter, but a loving home in its fullest sense to the children and young people in our community. We need a new suite of innovative care services available to young people regardless of their child protection status. Needed by some young people who present alone are medium and even long-term trauma-informed residential care services. Needed by others who may remain tenuously living in family environments is long-term assertive therapeutic outreach. We also need to expand the capacity of specialist adolescent services in this state. We need a child protection system adequately resourced to confidently provide teen-specific responses. We need a trauma-specific mental health service which can go to young people. We need residential drug detox and rehab. And we need more alternative education options through which to begin to address the social inclusion needs of highly vulnerable teens. Importantly, these specialist services need the fundamental capacity to engage carefully, therapeutically with young people, with intensity, time, with mobility, with trauma-informed skill. The development of a service system actually aligned to the needs of young people is reliant on leadership and on the creation of an engine room of policy development and service innovation. Needed is the establishment of a specific program area within services to youth through which to systemically embed responsibility and accountability for the care needs of this cohort. Most broadly, the change on which the fate of highly vulnerable teens in Tasmania depends remains a cultural one, and one we all have responsibility for leading. We need to make the care needs of these kids matter. It's not the kids that are too hard. What's too hard is trying to stretch services never designed to support them to fully meet their complex needs. What's too hard is trying to provide care in a context of few options, high caseloads, and missing adolescent services. Let's stop criminalising kids for the personal and systemic harm that adults inflict, and start acting like a community that takes care of its own. Thank you.
There's a power about the stories we've heard. And I hope what you can take away from today is the fact that it isn't too hard. What the report outlines to you is something of the challenges that we face, but it actually also says that it isn't too hard. But if together we commit ourselves to working with these vulnerable teens, we will be able to make the difference, to provide the community the care and the love that's needed. It isn't too hard, and that's what I hope you can take away from today. There is a problem, but this report says that it isn't too hard. Thank you very much for coming, and thank you very much for your interest in this report.